r/AskReddit, police officers of Reddit, have you ever had an all units call, and if so, what happened? 25 years ago, smallish rural town, my dad is a beat cop on patrol. My cat brings in a live mouse and is playing with it in the kitchen, and my mom is deathly afraid of rodents. So she calls dispatch and tells them my dad needs to come home. Dispatch gets on the line and tells my dad to switch to a secured line. There's an emergency at home. My dad's driving home to take care of the issue when all of the cops, probably like 4, of my small town on patrol, come with sirens and lights blazing on my house because all they heard was there was an emergency at my dad's house. My mother was mortified. Buddy's first day on the phone at a fire station in an international airport. Airliner detects a fire in the rear by the generator. They are coming in hot and need assistance immediately. Buddy decides a major airliner incident is imminent. Calls the city fire department, which might have 80 fire stations. They all send every unit, expecting complete mayhem. Airplane lands safely. False alarm. 200 fire trucks are lined up 4 miles outside the airport. No one was able to get in because the gate was closed. My rookie friend botched his all units call. Not an officer, but I'll share one of my buddies. He was an older gent who has passed on now, but if Reddit had been a thing when he was younger, this would have been a top tifu. When he was still new, he worked in a larger city. They had just gotten the shoulder mix. You know, the ones every cop has now mounted up by their mouth, so they can call in easier. When new to them, they wore the cord in front of their shirts, always in the damn way, and great handles when people wanted to wrestle. Jimmy was called one night to a bar brawl. He strolled into the bedlam almost over. He was a rookie, always getting the tell, so he was becoming famous among his department for ruining his uniforms. To the point he was having to come out of pocket to replace them. He walked into a vet telling him to cuff everyone still here, they'll sort them out later. Jimmy grabs the closest guy, they struggle a little, and go down to the ground. As they do, Jimmy splits his pants clean up the backside. Knowing he's going to be the butt of jokes anyway, he turns his head to announce to the other officers, well, that's another uniform down. And keys his mic. Base here's uniform down. So does everyone else in the county. The radio explodes with chatter, but the 3 cops at the bar already have their hands full, so they turn down their radios. Foo-2. Base decided to roll everything with lights to the scene. Jimmy said they were glad of the help when the first few cars rolled up, but they just kept coming. He was known as Jack the Radio Ripper till he transferred. Minor reprimand and he still had to pay for the pants. Years ago, friend of mine was a dispatcher for the county he covered, sheriff, IMS and fire communications, and also worked with communicating with other agencies as well. From the state troopers, he got some sort of text communication, not a phone text. This was before that was a thing, and it referred to an accident with injuries at the intersection of I-40 and Business 85. Something along the lines of collision I-40 bus 85 injuries involved. The way it was abbreviated and written made him misread it. Instead of an accident at 85 business, he thought there was a bus collision on I-40 with 85 people injured. He dispatched every damn fire truck and ambulance the county had. They show up, and it's a car wreck with minor injuries. Former cop here. The all units call was basically a riot at a large nightclub in a very rough area of the neighboring city. Once things were finally calmed down, and the dozen or so people were taken away, and my boss wanted us all back in our city, I was amazed at not only how many cops showed up but from where, counties and towns I had never heard of before. I looked up a few at the end of shift and some came from an hour plus away. Was a military police officer on a rather large base. I was getting off shift and being transported back to my barracks by the guys coming on shift so I could check in my weapon. Suddenly we got a call for all units to respond to a section of base housing. A military wife was having an affair with another soldier while her husband was on deployment. Supposedly the husband was due to return soon, so she tried to break it off with the other guy. He responded by stabbing her several times. My team leader and I searched the tree line with our weapons drawn, cause he's armed, and it's dark outside Yano. I actually passed the guy with my team leader a few yards behind me, and suddenly he comes out saying, "You're looking for me." Scared the shit out of me. My team leader covered him while I went in for the handcuffing, making sure that I had my knee firmly planted in between his shoulder blades and thoroughly covering his upper torso into the muddy terrain. Not sure what happened after that. He was taken to a holding cell by another squad and I got to go home. Ended up getting transferred from that base a few months later, but I know the wife survived the wounds. I got run over by someone fleeing the scene of an incident that they weren't involved in. He just got scared and apparently had a gun on him. I was out of my car talking to the person who called, and my partner was trying to stop the person who was really called on, so he didn't even see me get hit. No one knew I got hit or where I was because my radio went flying. Luckily there was a lot of witnesses who called 911 and found my radio. I confused the dispatcher because I was in so much shock that I came over radio taking like I normally do, but I was bleeding badly from my head and broke my leg. I didn't feel the pain for about 2 hours, so I had that call come out because of me. I'm also pretty sure a policy got made because of me too. We have calls almost daily that kind of meet this requirement. We have patrol sectors, each with a 2-man cruiser and a 1-man cruiser. The 2-man cars handle the high priority calls and the 1-man cars handle the more mundane stuff. So when a call comes in like shots fired, both sector cars go and usually other sector cars start radioing in that they are also responding. I do remember one night at midnight, which is shift change, we had a 2-man unit that shot a guy who pulled out a gun on them. You could hear gunshots over the radio and the car calling for help. The dispatcher kinda stumbled a bit, then said everybody go, everybody go. Former Royal Canadian Mounted Police here in a small tourist town was working on a regular midweek day shift when we received a dispatched call for a bomb threat in the industrial/commercial sector of the town. We all went there, called in the bomb squad, the dogs, got people out of the area, and so on. We were doing roadside when we got another call that the local bank's silent alarm was turned on. Now, we are in Canada, in a tourist town. Things are usually relatively calm, but this was absolutely chaotic. We got the all-unit call. They call our neighboring detachment to help. We all split and head to the bank. We arrive, around 20 some patrol cars all around, there to see all bank employees bounded and gagged, smoke everywhere from smoke bombs. We realize very quickly that the bomb threat was the diversion. We immediately gotta be on the lookout to get the 3 males identified by the bank staff, including a former bank employee. We get the be on the lookout to CPIC, got words to airports and border crossings. We managed to catch 2/3 of the guys. The last one flew back to his home country, was in Canada on a student visa. We remained on high alert for days after this, looking for the 3rd guy. Canadian authorities worked with their colleagues from the other guy's country to get him extradited almost a year later. In the end, as I recall, about $130,000 were missing and never recovered. For most of us, it was the first time we had a bomb threat and/or a robbery. First time we were guarding an area, expecting to be shot at from an unknown location. The robbers were reported to have AK-47 type looking weapons. Not a police officer, but used to work corrections. An inmate decided to try and fight one of our newer guards. The inmate failed to realize he was a military policeman trained in hand-to-hand combat and just a good fighter. Lol, we watched it on the cameras quite a few times after. Former military police here, Air Force Security Forces, to be specific. I was patrolling base housing doing some LE training. I had been on station less than a year and we heard a gunshot. We called it in immediately and started heading in the direction we heard it from. Those houses were duplexes and the neighbors called it in as well. BDOC, dispatch, send us, another police unit, and then the entire external response force. This was on a nuke base, so even things that don't actually have any impact on the nuclear mission totally have an impact on the nuclear mission. We had 19 total people on scene within about 3 minutes. As the first ones on scene, my post leader and I were already at the door when the rest of them showed up. I was thankful for them showing up when they did, because we were about to breach the door and go in just the 2 of us. We were told to hold for 30 seconds while the RF team got set up. Now we had a full stack and breaching equipment. I made a fist and thumped my helmet, signaling the breacher, who came up with his Halligan tool. My leader was number 2 in the stack, so she had to throw the flashbang. One of the RF guys passed it up from somewhere in the back of the stack, and as soon as the breacher had the door open, she tossed it in. All it did was scare the shit out of the dog. Only the husband was home, as his wife was deployed. He was sitting in the dining room on a chair with an SKS in his lap. I was maybe a pound or so of pressure away from pulling the trigger on my rifle when I realized that this dude's head was not fully intact. The SKS was only in his lap because the sling got caught on his arm after he pulled the trigger. As we cleared out the rest of the house, per procedure, I had my non-firing hand basically stuffed in my mouth to stop myself from puking. The dude's wife had sent him pictures and video of her cheating on him multiple times and telling him she wanted a divorce. He thought there was no other way out, so he shot himself. The only good news from that day is that we actually had picture and video evidence to use to charge her with adultery. OC, like an Air Force version of the FBI, pulled her out of her deployment and got her back on station, and we charged her with everything we could, including Articles 92, 107, 125 which covers sodomy, and 134. She was stripped of all rank, forfeited all pay, went to confinement, and was dishonorably discharged after her 11 years of service.